Greetings everyone, my name is Connie Wynn. This is my White Privilege presentation, Part 1. I will be presenting to you today from Part 3 of our book, Chapters 3 and 4, and I will begin with Chapter 3, which is entitled Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. The author begins by stating that she's often noticed men's unwillingness to grant that they are overprivileged, even though they admit women are disadvantaged. They say they work to improve the status of women in society. However, they can't or won't support the idea of lessening the privilege they have. In fact, it is considered a taboo to admit men gain from the disadvantages of women. These denials protect male privilege from being acknowledged, lessened, or ended. Recognizing that hierarchies in our society are often interlocking, the author realized there was most likely a phenomenon of white privilege, which was similarly denied and protected. She stated, "As a white person, I realized I had been taught about racism as something which puts others at a disadvantage, but had been taught not to see one of its corollary aspects, white privilege, which puts me at an advantage." She goes on to state whites are carefully taught not to recognize white privilege, as males are taught not to recognize male privilege. So people are now beginning to ask what it is like to have white privilege. She describes it as an invisible package of unearned assets, which I can count on cashing in every day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. White privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, codebooks, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks. Tools which give us, those who are of the white race, a definite advantage. Describing white privilege makes one accountable, says our author, which brings us to the question, what can we do to lessen or end it? Just think about that for a moment. After the author realized the extent to which men work from a base of unacknowledged privilege, she understood that much of their oppressiveness was unconscious. That is, they are unaware of their privilege. It is the same with white people. They do not consciously realize they have unearned skin privilege. Schooling gives them no training on seeing themselves as oppressors, unfairly advantaged, or a participant in a damaged culture. Whites are taught to think of their lives as morally neutral, normative, average, and ideal. So when they work to benefit others, it is seen as, quote, a work which will allow them to be more like us, end quote. The author then goes on to explain some of the daily white privileges that people with white skin have. These are also found in our textbook, I believe in Chapter 1, and I'm going to briefly go over these white privileges. Number 1, I can arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. Number 2, if I move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area I want to live. Number 3, I can be pretty sure my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. Now I want to stop and interject a story here which I shared in one of my reaction papers. I have a family member who lives out in the Nibley area of here in Logan, and she lives in a pretty upscale neighborhood out in Nibley. Well, recently one of her neighbors sold their home, and a Hispanic family purchased the home. Well, one day when I was out there visiting my sister, she was visiting with some of her neighbors, and some of the comments that I heard were, well, I hope they don't play Spanish music all the time, or, oh great, now we're going to have cars parked everywhere. It was very negative talk about these people that clearly belonged in the neighborhood. Number one, they were purchasing a home there. They deserved to be there. And I felt it was very unfair that they were already being judged. Now again, I believe that this is an example of white privilege at work, and totally unfair and uncalled for. Number 4, I can go shopping alone most of the time, well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. Number 5, I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. Now, times have changed, and I do feel like there are more positive examples of people of other races in the media now, but the majority of which, unfortunately, is still people of the white race. Number 6, when I am told about our national heritage, about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. I do feel like we owe a lot to the African Americans who came over to our country and brought us so much culture and tradition and things that they need to be recognized for, and I know that they have not been up to this point. Number 7, I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race. Well, that's not something that I ever thought of previously, but it's true. What would it be like for an African American child or an American Indian child or, to sit in a classroom? Would they be able to learn about the wonderful things that people of their race did in the past? I don't think that happens enough in our schools. I know it doesn't. Number 8, if I want to, I can be sure of finding a publisher for this piece on white privilege. Number 9, I can go into a music shop and count on finding music of my race represented, into a supermarket and find the staple foods of which fit with my cultural traditions, into a hairdresser shop and find someone who can cut my hair. Number 10, whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of financial reliability. Number 11, I can arrange to protect my children most of the time from people who might not like them. Number 12, I can swear, dress in secondhand clothes, or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, the poverty, or the illiteracy of my race. Well, I think this one stands out because I know that there are days when I do just that. I don't swear, but I don't necessarily fix up nice. I don't always answer the phone some days when I'm not feeling well, and I'm never criticized for that. But how many times are people in our society criticized for having a day when they don't, when they are wearing less than desirable clothes? Maybe they've been outside working all day, or they have a day when they don't want to answer the phone. They should not be criticized for these things. Number 13, I can speak in public to a powerful male group without being called a credit to my race. Number 14, I can do well in a challenging situation without being called a credit to my race. Number 15, I am never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. Number 16, I can remain oblivious of the language and customs of persons of color without feeling in my culture any penalty for such oblivion. Number 17, I can criticize our government and talk about how much I fear its policies and behavior without being seen as a cultural outsider. Number 18, I can be pretty sure if I ask to talk to the person in charge, I will be facing a person of my race. Number 19, if a traffic cop pulls me over or if an IRS audits my tax return, I can be pretty sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. Number 20, I can easily buy posters, postcards, picture books, greeting cards, dolls, toys, and children's magazines featuring people of my race. Now, I think this one really made me think. I thought back course, I chose a picture here of Disney movies that I absolutely love watching with my children. And it's true. You do not see very many people of other races represented in these movies. You don't see it. Books, another good example. I sat down and through all of the books that my children have. There are very few that ever show people of other races. I do not feel that such things adequately represent all of the diversity in our country, and that needs to change. Number 21, I can go home from most meetings of organizations I belong to feeling somewhat tied in, rather than isolated, out of place, outnumbered, unheard, held at a distance, or feared. Number 22, I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of race. Number 23, I can choose public accommodation without fearing that people of my race cannot get in or will be mistreated in the places I have chosen. 24, I can be sure if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. Now, we read this in our textbook, that there are huge disparities in medical care for those of ethnic minorities. Number 25, if my day, week, or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situation whether it has racial overtones. Number 26, and I think this is something that I never considered. I never would have thought of this until I read it in this book. I can choose blemish cover or bandages in flesh color and have them more or less match my skin. Now, I know they've made strides with makeup, but what about Band-Aids? Very few strides made there. The author goes on to state, these are privileges I once took for granted, but no longer. I recognized a pattern running through the matrix of white privileges. The pattern is assumptions passed on to me as a white person. And these are some of the assumptions. She could think of herself as belonging in major ways and making social systems work for her. She could freely disparage, fear, neglect, or be oblivious to anything outside of the dominant culture. And finally, being of the main culture, she was also free to criticize it openly. She stated, as my racial group was being made confident, comfortable, and oblivious, other groups were likely to be made unconfident, uncomfortable, and alienated. Whiteness protected me from many kinds of hostility, distress, and violence, which I was being subtly trained to visit in turn upon people of color. So what can be done to change white privilege? Here are some suggestions our author has made. She says, first, start by distinguishing between positive advantages, which we can work to spread, and the negative advantages, which, unless rejected, will always reinforce our present hierarchies. Let's get rid of those negative advantages. They need to go away. Number 2, get truly distressed, even outraged, about unearned race advantage. Number 3, help get the message out there of white privilege. Keeping people unaware helps prop up those in power and keeps power in their hands. I know before, again, I mentioned this earlier, before I took this class, it's not something I even knew existed. How many people in our world don't know it's out there? We need to get the message out there. It is there and it's got to change. So here is the ultimate question. Will we choose to use unearned advantage to weaken hidden systems of advantage? Or will we use any of our awarded power to try to reconstruct power systems? The choice is up to you. Thank you.